afternoon, everyone. David Ryan in service of that beautiful goddess of universal love, the greater good, and spiritual evolution. I'd like to also congratulate on Antifa's recent efforts to organize a massive 1917 October-style revolution, as going as an absolute and complete flop to overthrow our constitutional republic, funded by people like George Soros. And that's another thing I would thank Antifa for, literally admitting in one of their demonstrations that they work for Soros when they started to chant, George Soros, where's our money? George Soros, where's our money? In my honest opinion, that's an admission on their part. Now, I'd like to go a little bit into the sort of mindset here of the overall Antifa member. I would say one key element of that is the educational system. The other part of it is also the mainstream media that seems to reinforce it, but I wish to go into the educational aspect of it. I like to talk about an individual. His name is William Norman Dodd. He died sometime in the early to middle 80s. He was involved in investigating in 1929 what caused the stock market crash as he was working for the banking institutions. And what he basically found out is that it was due to unsound banking, meaning that the Federal Reserve, the privately owned Federal Reserve, really was not out for the best interest of the country, but out for the best interest of those who run it. And when he basically submitted his report to the major financial institutions, they basically kind of understood what it was. They told Mr. Dodd at that time that what you're telling us, Mr. Dodd, is that we have to go back to sound banking. And also they said, that's impossible. That can never happen. We'll never be able to go back to sound banking again. Now, to move forward, Mr. Norman Dodd was involved in investigating the un-American activities in the mid-50s. And what was found out is that communism seemed to be springing up all over the planet overall, particularly in China and Cuba. And they found out that one of the institutions in general that was supporting Chairman Mao was the Institute of Pacific Relations. And it turned out, when you follow the money trail of that, it was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. So he was being charged to investigate what role were these foundations playing in the rise of communist regimes, particularly the Ford, the Carnegie, and the Rockefeller Foundations. What Mr. Norman Dodd found out when he was looking at the early minutes of the Carnegie Foundation was that they were thinking about how can they alter the way of life of an entire people. And they kind of came to the conclusion, sorry about that, that basically war was the most effective means to alter the way of life for an entire people. And so they decided, okay, how do they get involved in a war? Well, they came to the conclusion in order to steer the country into a war, they had to take control of the State Department. And after they started the war, interestingly enough, they start the wars, and all of us fight the wars. So basically, in general, you have these ultra-elitists looking at us as nothing but a bunch of cannon fodder to die for them. In my honest opinion, how about we stop dying for them? Now, to move on from the wars that they created, they had to ensure that the people's way of life did not revert back to a state that was prior before the war itself. And in order for them to do that, they had to seize control of the educational system. And one key aspect that they tried to perpetuate in the educational system is the mindset of collectivism overall. So basically, what you're seeing with Antifa is the collectivist mindset. And I have very little doubt that has something to do with the agenda that was set forth at least 100 years ago in controlling our educational system. Well, I guess one of the key elements in creating this false ego. And that's why I've now been very vehement in opposing the false ego overall. And I wish to thank everyone for watching. You can go on YouTube and type in on the search William Norman Dodd, and you can see the interviews that took place. It was kind of interesting when he saw the president of the Ford Foundation. I believe at the time his name was Rowan Gaither, and Mr. Gaither told Dodd, and Dodd really just fell off his seat, that basically we are operating under presidential directives to ensure that the way of life of the American people can be peacefully merged with that of the Soviet Union. Well, I wish to say again, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good one.